But it's so important that we do things with a willing heart to please God. What some of the passages in Ephesians tell us is that we can bring our soul to Jesus, at work. And I guess what I'm saying there, when we go to work, we have our soul. That comes with us when we go into work every day. It's how we act at work that is pleasing to God. One of the things in verse 5, and I'll be concentrating on that, is I'll reread it. And let me back up, because I love this one, because this is slaves and masters. And everybody goes, Tom, we don't got no slaves. We got no masters. I go, where have you been? I got the wage earner, the hourly earner, and the boss. There are many people who might in their own mind sit there and go, I feel like a slave working for the company I work for. But let me read this. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Think about that. Whatever your boss is talking to you about, your master, you should obey him as if you were obeying Christ. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but like slaves of Christ, do the will of God from your heart. What does that mean? Anybody have a thought? I think that means you need to, whatever you do, even in tough circumstances, even when you feel pressured, even when you have other things on your mind, you need to focus on your work, and you need to be willing to do what is asked of you with a willing heart. You shouldn't be resistant. Shouldn't be, I think that's stupid. What do they know about this? I've been doing this for 25 years. I know the better way. Well, you might have some insight. Maybe you should bring that to their attention. But you need to do what they've asked you to do it. And if you do what you're asked, you are obeying Christ. Christ is our boss. There are so many things that I look at my work today where I have been troubled. And this last week, since Steve did this, and I'm thinking God had something to do with all this, helping me with my current situation at work. Because I've been frustrated. I've been doubtful. I've been thinking they don't know what's going on. But then I started this week trying to do things by saying, I am going to do it as if Jesus Christ was standing next to me. Because I want to please him. And that is giving me a sense of comfort in a stressful situation at work, because I'm not trying to make them like me. I'm not trying to, just please that one person. I'm not trying to do something politically correct. I am now trying to do it for God. And would God be pleased at the end of the day for the decisions I made, the actions I took, and the places and the way I related to people? It's hard to do. It's very hard. To obey Christ is the very essence of being a disciple of Christ. To obey your boss is the very essence of being a disciple of Christ. Whenever we don't understand why we're committed to obeying him, because we know that God loves us and he looks out for us in everything we do. And he puts us into places where he feels we need to be. So we need to trust him in that situation where we have the stress at work or what we're doing at work. We need to trust in God that he is putting us here. We need then to obey our employer, our boss. We need to obey God. Verse 5 also talks about, obeying your earthly masters. And again, I think that's important to say, obeying your earthly masters. Because it is nowhere is it saying that you're supposed to do anything or be asked to do anything that is against the teachings of God. That's where you draw the line. If your company was asking you to do something immoral or was not reflecting God, then you have every right not to do it. You might get persecuted for it, but you will be pleasing to God. You go into verse 6. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eyes are on you, but like slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Again, that's going into that willingness of the heart. You need to be able to go out there and work with people and other people around you. I'm going to back up. I wanted to say this in the beginning, but this goes back to the very first job I ever had. I graduated from the University of Richmond. My father had been a lobbyist and a lawyer and an association director to the oil industry, independent refiners, independent gasoline marketers of the country. You would know the independents like Wawa today. You represented those people in Washington. I interviewed all the major oil companies back then. Now, there's only a few people in this room who remember some of these names like Texaco, Gulf, Shell, Sinclair, and things like that. I interviewed all of them because I had a marketing degree from the University of Richmond, which is a very prominent business school. And they all said, Tom, you could be a battery salesman, you could be a clown at grand openings, you could do this, this, and this, and that wasn't me. I wanted to learn from the ground up, petroleum marketing, retail marketing, everything involved with that. And my father said, you need to go talk with one of the bigger independent petroleum wholesaler jobbers. And he said, by chance, there's a gentleman named Jack Peaster, who's the current president of the Independent Marketing Association of the United States in Washington, D.C. Well, my father did help me get that interview. I went in there and met Jack Peaster, sat down and had an interview, went through the whole process, thought it was kind of going okay. But then all of a sudden he rears back and he said, Mr. Ellis, I want to ask you one question. It's a very important question. He said, what is the most important thing to know in the business world today? Now you're just out of college and you're getting asked that kind of a question. You're kind of going, this could be that. Do I get the job or not get the job? What are you supposed to say here? Well, God was working on me back then and I didn't even know it to this day. Because my answer was one that I firmly believed in then and I firmly believed in now. And I talk about it anywhere I work. The most important thing to know in the business world today is that you're in the people business. And what I mean by that, it doesn't matter whether you're an accountant, a welder, you're in intelligence, you're a teacher, you work with your hands, you are going to deal with people. And that's what God puts us together in a workplace, because it gives us a place to do His work, to be His disciples in that workplace. At that funny little meeting, he said, Mr. Ellis, I'm going to hire you, but you got to get approval of my Vice President, Jack Skurlock. I'm flying you to Denver, Colorado. I just bought 178 service stations in Denver, Nebraska, and Wyoming out there. And I went out there to meet this gentleman. His name is Jack Skurlock, and he was an Iowa farmer. 2 of my fingers are like one of his. Didn't have any little fingernails, they were just worn off. He interviewed me. And again, God was working here, because he looked at me and he asked, Mr. Ellis, let me tell you what the job requirements are. And he said, we require you to work a minimum of 66 hours a week. We require you to buy all your uniforms. You need 5 pants, 5 shirts, 5 ties, 5 jackets. The uniform you wore for them was like these little red Eisenhower jackets, Marine Corps blue pants with a red stripe with spit shine black shoes, powder blue shirt, and a black tie. You will be responsible for all your station's cash shortages. You are responsible to work any shift any of your employees are not able to make. Mr. Elson, why don't you go back to the hotel tonight and think about it? No, I did. I got back to that hotel room and I sat down on the bed and said, that man's nuts. Oh, plus, yes, you'll like this too. He said, we're going to start you off at $9,600 a year. This is back in 1975. Just at 66 hours, that's about $2.91 an hour. It wasn't far off minimum wage back then. I went back to that thing and sat down and I said, no, this guy's nuts. I had a temporary offer coming in from Loyal's Title Insurance out of University of Richmond. I was one of 3 candidates for that position. And that was one I really thought I liked, marketing, just doing that. I'd call home, talk to my mother. She said, I got a letter here from Loyal's Title. I said, well, open it. Done. And it was a rejection. Mr. Ellis, you were one of 2 people. The person we selected has 22 years experience. Going with them. I went, whew. But I still thought, these guys are nuts. God was working with me in that workplace because most of my life under my father, I'd had it pretty easy. You know, I didn't want for anything. He bought me my first car, he paid for my college. For some people would say I was pretty spoiled. So the idea of those long hours and stuff weren't too appealing to me. I was thinking, good gosh, I went to college. I'm not going to do this. Next morning, I was going back to meet with Mr. Skurlock, walking in there, and I was going to be able to tell him no. Little word, they wouldn't fly me back home, but I thought at least I'll figure that out after that. God was there for me. Mr. Skurlock looked at me, and he just said, well, Mr. Ellis, what's your answer? I was going to say, no. I said, yes. I don't even know where it came from. I said, yes. And I went, oh my God, what did I just do? Immediately thought, well, I'll get home and call him up and say no. He said, Mr. Ellis, we need you back here in 3 days. It takes 3 days to drive from Northern Virginia to Denver, Colorado. I called my father. Somehow he got a hold of my car and got a hitch put on it. I showed up, there was a U-Haul sitting behind the back of my car. Loaded up, drove out to Colorado. I never worked so hard and long in my life. For the 7 years that I was with him, the first 5 years, every 3 months they gave me a new station with a new difficulty, a new thing. 66 hours a week was vacation time. You on average probably work 70, 72 hours. Only day I really had off was Sunday. If I didn't have, unless I had one of my staff not able to work. I rose up to be a supervisor over about 7 retail stations. They were spread out over 3 states, so I had to drive back and forth. My first paycheck was 31 cents because they took out the uniforms, they took out the cash. First station I walked into, the guy literally, Mike Mayberry, handed me a coin changer and a roll of money, keys, combinations, as floor safes, and said, do you know how to operate pumps? I said, yeah, I know how to operate pumps. See ya. And I was in business then, back then. But the long story short, work and labor brings you a sense of purpose, a sense of dignity, and a sense of accomplishment. We should all relish that. And that is very important for us to do that. Let me get this one section. Verse 6, where it talks about obey them not only when you win favor. Yeah, I'm sorry, I already went like this. I had this story. One of the things about labor and working, it goes back to an old story like of Rumpelstiltskin. How many remember Rumpelstiltskin? Okay. Well, he was this crazy little guy that would spin flax into gold. That's what we can be doing as Christians. It doesn't matter where you work. You can take your work environment and turn it into a ministry for God. Doesn't matter. How you treat the other people, you should be treating them as you would want to be treated yourself as a Christian, but mostly you want to treat them as it is pleasing to God.
Tom, what year was that you started your first job?
1975.
How much did you start at?
$9,600 a year.
1948, I started at $30 a week, $1,500.
Wow. Little thing about my father is he was an excellent orator. He spoke before the Congress several times. He was asked by Nixon to be Attorney General. He turned it down because it didn't pay enough. And I think back then it was something like $3,800 or something when he got talking about it. But in verse 6, let me just read that real quick. Oh, I did go ahead. I'm sorry. In verse 6, there was 3 points I wanted to talk about. That is, the first thing is, when you're working, do the will of God in your work. Focus on God whenever you're working. Be a servant of Christ at all times. God is always at work with you, and He's in the workplace. He is going to use you as a conduit to reach other people. So you need to always remember that. When you're there and things are tough and you're working with other people, you want to know those other people that you reflect the values of Jesus Christ. You can change people's attitudes. You can change a boss, a manager's attitude, how they interact with their employees. I have a thing at my company. I'm not known for cussing. And I work amongst truck drivers. And when they're in the dispatch office and people start talking, they don't cuss when I'm in the room. And one of them came up and he said, Tom, when you have cussed, it doesn't bother me. It's the way they communicate. So I'm listening to them. But then there's other times they've talked to me about the cussing. They'll say, Tom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cuss and all that. I said, that's okay. But I said, you might want to just take a little more time in your thought to say it a different way. Because you might find more people wanting to hear it than if you just cuss at them or attack them. And some of them said, I'm doing that at home. So you can't have an effect. So I guess I'm going a little bit too long.
No, I would put your thing up. I was waiting
okay.
for your cue was all.
Okay. Well, I guess one of the things I've gone a little long. You've all helped me. I'll make this a little better for tomorrow. But one of the things is verse 9. Because this is the reverse. Masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Do not threaten them, since you know that He who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with Him. If you are in the position of being a boss, or you're in a position of leadership, or you're in a position of head of a committee, you need to treat those same people with a servant's heart. Now, as an employer or a boss, it doesn't mean you take orders from your employees, but you look out for their good. That is your requirement that you need to do for God. And if these relationships, if more people in work, more people in private conversations, in volunteerism, in discussing anything, in discussing church issues, if people will take the time and the grace to listen to the other person and hear their view, and do it with a godly heart and one of love, and not one of attack or trying to make someone feel less or trying to speak over, but to openly say in your heart, is this pleasing to God? Is this what Jesus would do? If we follow that, I think we would have happier lives and stronger relationships. If you could cue this one up. Here are 10 ways you might be a light in your workplace. Join in. Join in conversations. If you're at a place that has a cafeteria, sit with somebody new. Don't always sit with the same people. Get to know somebody. Reach out. Get off a phone. If you are texting somebody and you instead of hitting like when they tell you they've got a terrible problem, I've never understood that. Person says, my boyfriend just broke up with me. The world's horrible. And you like? I'm going, that doesn't sound good. You might be able to respond, but what you ought to do, pick up the phone or go see that person. Have an interaction. Be with them. Get to know people. It's that same thing. Don't sit at the same tables. When we come out of our church at the end of a service, we often come and just sit with the same people when we come out here. We should move around a little bit and get to know some of those other people. Invite somebody over to sit. Doesn't take much. Don't have to do it a lot. Just do it once or twice. Imagine. What does that mean at work? Just think of ways that you can do God's work while you're at work. Maybe you've overheard an employee having a bad day. If it's nothing more, just to comfort them, or to talk to them, or to listen. Pray for people. I'm doing this past week. I'm praying for the management of the people that I'm now working for. I'm praying that they will do God's work, and that I will be a good servant to them, and that they will look upon me as an asset. Honor. Honor the workplace. Honor your job. Honor the people that work around you. Be present. That's a tough one. I know, because Jen can tell you, all of a sudden I've got 400 things going on and I'm trying to talk with her and I got this and she's trying to tell me something. I'm not giving her my attention. Be present. When you are with people, you've got to clear your mind of those unnecessary distractions and give them the time to communicate. Listen to them. Be a part of them. That is the greatest gift that you can give. Think people, though. Ask questions. This is a great thing in an employment world, is some people get working and they get into a box and they go, the best thing to do is not say anything, never ask a question. No, ask questions. Choose people above issues. Big one. What does people think that means? Choose people above issues. When there's conflicts at work, don't take it personal on what that conflict is. Understand the person you're dealing with is a person. They may have different views, they may have different values, but treat them honorably, treat them with respect, treat them as God would want you to treat them. Treat them as Jesus Christ was in the middle of that conflict and how he would handle it. Be kind. On some of the toughest days, when people are having some of the toughest times, just being a little bit kind to someone can make their day. Extend a hand out. Offer to help somebody. Somebody need a little help on their work, offer to help them do it. And shift your perspective. Shift your perspective from just, it's a job. It's what I do. It's a workplace. I want to go home. No, it's your ministry. It is a place for you to bring God to other people. Okay. Now we have a workplace prayer, if y'all might join me in this. My Heavenly Father, as I enter this workplace, I bring your presence with me. I speak your peace, your grace, your mercy, and your perfect order in this office. I acknowledge your power over all that will be spoken, thought, decided, and done within these walls. Lord, I thank you for the gifts that you have blessed me with. I commit to using them responsibly in your honor. Give me a fresh supply of strength to do my job. Anoint my projects, my ideas, my energy, so that even the smallest accomplishments may bring you glory. Lord, when I am confused, guide me. When I am burned out, infuse me with the light of the Holy Spirit. May the work that I do and the way that I do it bring faith, joy, and a smile to all that I come in contact with that day, or contact with today. That's basically it. The one thing I would just tell everybody to do